Greetings and bienvenue, midnight crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I've been researching all the reptilian encounters humans have had over the years. I'm trying to piece together the truth. There is something to all of these stories from around the world, from the Naga to the Anunnaki and other serpent gods. I'm not talking about shapeshifters, although some tend to be reptilian in nature. I'm talking about the 7 to 8 feet tall full reptiles witnessed by people. If you have shapeshifter stories though, please share. For example, someone posted this before and it really interested me, because it lines up with the Lacerda stuff. There was a tunnel rat in Vietnam who encountered some underground performing a ceremony. That one is very interesting. You have the whole Lacerda thing that claims they actually evolved on this planet along with us and are older than us. Apparently they tolerate us on the surface and indeed to eat us. But first they need to instill a massive amount of fear into us. There is the story of the military people who were working with the aliens and saw them freeze a group of people in a room and subjected them to terror over a period of time. Jordan Maxwell was told by a man about a group of 6 Christian families who went on an outing into the Colorado mountains and stumbled upon a daylight ceremony of people in hoods swaying back and forth in a circle. There appeared a 7-foot reptile who immediately saw the Christians at the top of the hill and pointed them out. They were so far away the family was going to leave and thought there is no way they'd catch them, but somehow the reptilian was there in under a minute as it somehow scaled them out. It eyed them all before it decided to let them run away.
There's always the David Eckhart story, Opus. Pretty famous case, and interesting info in my opinion. In the summer of 2008, I started talking to David Eckhart. He lived with his family in a wooded area near Pensacola, Florida. David repeated a story that he had previously told other people. I had heard similar scenarios in the past, but there was something different about David's saga and it struck a chord in me. Over the past 2 years, I have been privy to videos, audio, screen caps and other evidence that David has provided to me. I have uploaded videos and photographs to this blog and the wiki to gauge the reaction of the paranormal community. Overall, the reception has been somewhat disappointing, but to be honest, that was expected. During at least one of David's encounters, abductions, he witnessed a device that he described as a large egg that had writing or graphics on it. He was able to quickly scribble down some of the graphics he witnessed pic-related. From the very beginning, it was made known to David that he was not in danger, but was being given the opportunity to see what needed to be seen. The aliens didn't tell him why they were showing him these things, but they seemed to think that it was important. His alien tour guide, or whatever you want to call it, was supposedly instructed to show him certain aspects of alien habitations. Please note as well, David's family was also abducted but kept separate from him during these tours. David described seeing vast underground caverns that he was told were under the Earth's surface. In these caverns, it became obvious which species was in charge, the reptilians. The Greys were also there. They do not use that name, but are a lesser class, and other species of aliens dwell there as well. Generally, it looked like a mining operation that utilized manual labor, including human manual labor. Now, I realize there are probably alarms going off in your head right now. But Eckhart did not strike me as a liar. It was obvious he had concerns and questions of his own. I'll agree that some of these descriptions are similar to those of other experiencers, such as Pamela Stonebrooks. For those who don't know, Stonebrook claimed to have had intimate relations with a reptilian being. But unlike her and others, David has never attempted to profit from this. I feel his accounts should be at least fairly evaluated. David describes his guide. A reptilian is basically a grouch who doesn't like humans. He got the impression that he and other humans were tolerated, but considered a minor species by the reptilians. He was told that the alien presence was known by the world powers and that they all had a relationship that has been going on for many years. Another interesting observation was that these beings believe in a higher being or power and are all connected by it. This religious connection has little to do with faith. Rather, it's a law that must be revered by all. The one aspect of David's encounters that concerns me is that he is still receiving visits. He sent me a video recently and asked if I could review it. The video is of a dresser in his bedroom. This was one of 3 areas in the house where these beings would enter. David speculates that there was a portal being used by them to enter his home. David tried to video record these entities when they entered, but always to no avail. The footage would always be blank. Then on a whim he set up a fog machine to see if it would do anything. Here's a photo. The Greys would try to enter David's residence while cloaked in order to explore the house without his knowledge. David explains that you could still see a ripple or mirage outline of these cloaked beings, but only the general shape of the body was distinguishable. They apparently needed to revert back to a more solid form in order to physically grasp or move objects. The Greys appear to be a subservient race, given the more menial and labor-intensive work. They supposedly work alongside other races, including human, in the underground caverns. They are also used as Earth tour guides for visiting alien beings. In David's case, his house was on the tour. His descriptions of how these beings would meander through his house at random times of the day and marvel at the human home and use of common amenities was fascinating. I will state that David and I are still in regular contact. He says he is still being visited, in particular by one individual that monitors David and his family. I believe David and I were brought together for a reason. He tried for many years to get other UFO abduction researchers to take on his case. MUFO and the Mutual UFO Network flat out refused to investigate. This is a shame. David has been very forthcoming with me since we started this investigation together 5 years ago. And I am very grateful to him. If he's telling the truth, humans have been transported to undisclosed locations, on and off the planet, by reptilians for various uses. Those in government knew this was occurring, and even made an agreement with these beings. The contract is referred to as the Greentext Treaty, and was made in 1954. The basic terms were that the aliens involved could take some livestock, then test their implanting techniques on a few human beings, but that they had to hand over details about the people involved. Over time, the aliens altered the bargain until they decided they wouldn't abide by it at all. After 1979, it became quite clear that the treaty was no longer in force. I'm not going to go into the information I have been made aware of because the reality is stark. I became aware that these humanoids were aware of me once I started interviewing David. For whatever reason, I was allowed to disclose much of the information provided to me with no interference. During the past 5 years, I have been visited at least twice by what I describe as the Tall Greys, even though each incident was very brief. There was no verbal communication, but I was visually shown in my mind's eye locations within their realm. These locations are right here on Earth, and they include a vast network of underwater stations. There are also deep underground caverns where manual labor is used. Though some are human, the majority are of other non-human races. This was all I was shown, just brief glimpses of their dominion. I want to publicly express my displeasure at Fact or Faked, the Paranormal Files, and their treatment of this case. Their obvious attempts to discredit David's claims by using poorly improvised props to recreate 2 of his videos are disheartening. I have since discussed the Eckhart family ordeal with ex-FBI investigator Ben Hansen. He was the one who did the debunking on Paranormal Files, and he stated that he believed David and his family. He said he did not think that his team debunked the claims on the show at all. The entire area, Pensacola, Milton, and Gulf Breeze, Florida, has been a historical hotbed for paranormal activity. David and I truly appreciate the hundreds of supporters who have acknowledged that this case is significant and must be taken seriously. Kick-related, another photo taken by David purportedly shows a reptilian entering his home via a portal of some kind. And another one. Here's another one. A New Orleans police officer came forward about working with reptilians in the aftermath of a hurricane. He said after doing so, he and a few others were harassed by the military.
My name is Matt R. I served on the New Orleans Police Department during Hurricane Katrina. I stayed with the department for almost 2 years after the storm. It was only after I was seriously injured in a car accident that I left the department. I have almost completely recovered and now work in finance. Throughout the past 9 years, I have had several abductions involving reptilian aliens. Probably the most interesting of my abductions is the one that took place in 2005, just a few months before Katrina. I was abducted by reptilians and then forced to help them train in anti-riot techniques. This training occurred in a mall and was coordinated in concert with a U.S. military group of indeterminate affiliation. They wore dark battle dress uniforms, no insignias. Since then, I've had many experiences. The most traumatic one was when I learned that over 10 other cops and military members had reptilian training abductions similar to my own. Half of them were present at the same mall training as myself. The other half were taken to the University of New Orleans College basketball arena. On the floor of the arena, they trained the reptilians in hostage rescue training and dynamic room entry breaching. I learned about this fact during a radio appearance on Joe Montaldo's show. As detailed on the radio show, Many of those taken to the mall even recalled the same flower kiosk that I first mentioned. This is not surprising, since the reptilians spent most of their training in the middle of the mall, probably to maximize the shielding of the training noise from the outside. All of these abductees reported this to Joe Montaldo's organization independently, without having ever met each other. The only common thread is they are all police, or military, and currently active in Louisiana. Many of them were also residents at the Forest Isle Apartments complex. It is a massive complex on the west bank of New Orleans. But it has a very high density of police and military residents due to the discounts they offer. One of these other abductees, a detective in the 6th District of the New Orleans Police, has had some harassment experiences similar to what I've experienced. He actually had a black SUV with military plates follow him while on duty. The harassment only stopped when he hired a private detective to follow the SUV. Another of these abductees, a patrolman, cannot shop at Winn-Dixie any longer. An implant located behind his knee crashes the checkout register. It does it every time. And every time, it causes the register to bring up the Samira code. The most recent one to come forward was a detective from Jefferson Parish, about a year ago. Jefferson Parish covers much of the suburban area around New Orleans. This Jefferson Parish detective remembers a detail of the mall abduction which most of us did not. Apparently, one of the stores was converted into a medical triage center, complete with cots. But it was unclear if this was to handle injured civilians or human military, police or reptilians. The cots were all empty. I was hoping to update you once I could get a few more of us to go public, but it looks like that won't happen. So, I'm going to have to go forward alone. I can understand their hesitancy. Most TV alien documentaries don't pay anything. They certainly can't replace a steady salary. I work in stock trading, so I'm somewhat immune. It's one of the few professions on Earth that you can't be blackballed from, unless you engage in some direct financial crime. The good news from learning all of this has been that several of these other abductees confirmed details of what I saw in the mall training. Specifically, they confirmed that I stood among the reptilians, rather than the humans. In fact, my rank was higher than any other human there. This would fit with a detail that I was withholding, but would now like to reveal. I was standing near two of the reptilians as they spoke to each other after the main training session was over. One of them referred to me as an advisor. He complained that there are not enough advisors like me to go around, and he also said, to my surprise, that he would trust my opinion over those of his superiors. The other element I gathered from their discussion is that, as an advisor, I am not allowed to give orders, nor am I actually in the command structure, so I don't really need to obey orders either. I can basically only offer suggestions. Strange that the reptilians even have such a position in their military. As far as I know, the only human equivalent would be a business consultant in the private sector. That oddity is, among the military and police abductees present at the mall training, I was by far the lowest ranking person in human terms. I was only halfway through the academy. Why would the reptilians give me a higher position like that, unless there was some kind of issue with my bloodline ranking? This is why it is important to understand the differences between reptilian, Nordic, and gray alien abductees. There seem to be clear lines of delineation in why different groups become interested in specific humans. In terms of reptilians, there seems to be a strong genetic bloodline interest. This also ties into why many reptilian abductees display a bit of Stockholm Syndrome in relation to their abductors. The reptilians go out of their way to convince such abductees that they are related to them.
I don't know. Strange case. There's a lot of shit out there that makes it hard to piece together a coherent story. This one in particular leaves me scratching my head.
I also want to include something I read a long time ago. It was probably 2001 or 2002. I was browsing the internet one day. Dial-up tech. At the time, I frequented a few boards that are now defunct. In one of them, a man who claimed to be military shared a story that kinda stuck with me. I'll tell you why in a sec, but first let me share what he posted. So he said he was sent down to Mexico with a group of guys to essentially work security in the middle of nowhere. I forget why or when exactly this was. But the man said there was nothing around for miles, just desert and mountains. at a little base where he and his group were. He was looking through binoculars out into the distance when he noticed something walk out of a cave. He said it looked like a large reptile man with a long tail. Instantly, the reptilian looked at him like it knew it was being watched. The man told his superior, who happened to be standing nearby. The superior looked through the binoculars and saw the same thing. There was more to this story, but I can't recall it right now. But the reason it stuck with me is because I have family in Mexico. One of my uncles owns a huge piece of land down there. It's in the middle of nowhere. The government has been asking him to sell it for years, but my uncle refuses. When I first asked him why, he said that there was actually gold in some of the caves, and the government just wanted to take it for themselves. But then, a few years after reading this guy's story, my uncle and I were having a few beers during Christmas. We got to talking about the land. I asked him why he won't go down and take the gold for himself. My uncle got very serious and told me that there are things that live there. Naturally, I was thinking about snakes and scorpions. But he shocked me when he said that reptile people live in those caves. My uncle is an old rancher and doesn't really put up with nonsense. It was very shocking to hear him say something like that.
A terrible crime. The giants were slaves to the lizard empires of the Yucatan, bred from normal humans as guards and laborers for the high priests and tenders of the holy spawning pools. In this bloody empire before time, they were slaves, but valued compared to the multitudes of lesser human chattels. They had much to lose. One spring equinox, when the great eclipse marked not just the new year but an entire new epoch, the giants made their move. The temple guards sacrificed the bloated high priest on his own altar, tearing his still beating three-chambered heart from his body and calling down the star of catastrophe from the heavens. With such a sacrifice, at such a moment, made at the very place where the pyramidal web focused its power on that spot, the star sent no champion, no avatar, no metaphorical fulfillment. It came bodily down to earth on the temple itself, killing all in that evil city, slave and lizard alike, and shattered and twisted the very earth itself. In an instant, the myriad lizard lords were turned to stone. Their cities were consumed by the angry earth. Fiery ash rained down. The sun shone a dim, bloody red. Winter came and snow fell, everywhere, for years. A few of the greatest of the lizards resisted the terrible curse, mostly those on the other side of the world. A few even survived to this day, but their power and numbers never recovered. The age of the ice beasts had begun. Few humans survived to see the new age, but their numbers eventually recovered. The few remaining giants ruled in a few places, the ruins of the Yucatan, the Arctic North, the green savannas, now deserts of northern Africa. I'm not going to get into all the stories of how each of the surviving tribes of giants were killed off, one way or another, over the millennia that followed. Just to remind you of the injustice that our liberators, who sacrificed so much, were extinguished by the very humans they saved.
This is a good thread I'll share. Nothing extraordinary, but it sticks in my mind. I moved into a very old farmhouse, very old barn, very old property backed up to a huge very old forest. When it's warm it's normal to see snakes everywhere. Huge garter snakes, big all-black racer snakes. I even saw one that was like a scarlet snake or a coral snake. You learn to live with them, shoo them off, etc. The two-story barn top level is all storage. The bottom floor is an old auto shop for fixing cars. One day I saw the biggest snake I've ever seen in my life. Its girth was bigger than my forearm. Easily 7 to 8 feet long, half coiled upstairs and on handrail and mostly just soaking up some sun. Literally fucking shocked. I just stared at it for a bit. I didn't want to bother it or kill it. The snake makes a subtle intimidating movement and hiss very quick motion. Snake was pretty much saying fuck off, which is strange because 99% of snakes are terrified of humans and just seek cover. This one was telling me to fuck off. A year or so later I helped the neighbor put holiday shit in top story storage part of the barn. Open door and see massive fucking snakeskin in the middle of the floor. Logistically it would have been 3 to 4 times bigger than the snake I encountered. 2 feet wide and maybe 5 to 6 feet long, skin shedding. Shit my pants basically because of the size and showed neighbor, We just cleaned it up and forgot about it. Makes me think Anons. It was fucking massive. So now I'm very careful when I cut my grass or use a weed whacker. Any size snake I help it shoo off and escort it to safety because I don't want to kill it and be watched by maybe something bigger.
I encountered a weird albino-looking reptilian while out for a walk one night. It had a long, lanky appearance and eyes that glowed. Not shine, but had a kind of bioluminescent effect. It had fangs, but they weren't super prominent. It didn't make any sounds. It just looked at me. I only had my eyes on it for about 3 or 4 seconds before it disappeared. When it disappeared, it made this loud cracking noise, like when a bullet whips past your head. When I say it disappeared, it kind of snaked into the air, very fast. I had trouble comprehending what actually happened when it did because I was trying to make sense of what I heard and saw. Haven't seen one of those things since then. Anyone else seen a thing like this?
When I hit 19, I went up to a shrine in the mountain where the elders kept one of the 15 copies of Al-Azif al-Aman, and finally opened the book. It said to go to a temple near Tadmur, Palmyra, Syria, where I would need to bring with me gold, mercury, and a living animal. I took a dog and the other items and went there. I reached the temple. When the guard saw me, he asked me what I had with me. I told him it's gold, mercury, and a dog. He let me in. Inside was a door with a bending tube outward. I was to murder the dog under the tube while setting both the mercury and gold on a pan and fire. The door opened once smoke started rising. I was greeted by what the book calls Qareen, when in fact it looked like a mix between a gray alien and a rat. No mouth, just a long nose. It wasn't an alien, nor was it a demon. It introduced itself as Qareenak, which in Arabic is basically your Qareen. A Qareen is a spiritual double of human, either part of the human himself or a complementary creature in a parallel dimension. It asked me what I wanted. It had no mouth. It took me about 5 minutes to finish screaming and panting. I was scared shitless, but the door was closed and the thing was just there asking me. I told it that I wanted to meet God. It said, and I quote, "You cannot meet the sound, but you can dance to its voice." It asked me, "What do you want?" I said, "I want to create life." No fucking idea why I said that. It said, "You create as you speak." And then it lifted me up in the sky and literally threw me in the desert. I had 2 fractures on my tibias, both legs, from the landing, and I was missing blood even though this wasn't a vampire. The Bedouins of Tadmur dragged my sorry ass to a hospital. Things exist. I have seen one with my own eyes and it was not a joke.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember that all videos have been archived on the Odyssey page.